Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a brand new episode of Opinion City. I'm your host, Ralph, once again hanging out with my co host, Sean. Sean, what is going on?
What's going on, man? I have been waiting very patiently for this episode. I have been super excited to discuss your topics or your list as well as my list of the top five. Well, actually, we just mentioned it off air. Six uh, heels in wrestling history. Because
Yeah, so,
we couldn't pick runner ups, so we just kind of
yeah,
both added a sixth member to our group.
yeah, so, yeah, unbeknownst to either of us, we both came up with a sixth pick that we could not eliminate. So, yeah, and this is going to be really interesting. So, this kind of came up last week. I had heard a conversation in discussing the passing of the Iron Sheik, and the conversation was that the Iron Sheik was the Iron Sheik was the top heel moment in professional wrestling history. That the Iron Sheik had really, because he was so hated, simply was a huge part of starting Hulkamania, and so that got me thinking a little bit about this idea of top heel moments where heels really kind of define their role, define who they are, do something for the business that I think is much bigger than just that moment. So I thought this would be a great topic of discussion for us, and so that's pretty much going to be the majority of our discussion today, because we got a lot of stuff to talk about. But I know before we get started with that, there's something that you want to talk about.
Yeah, I don't want to touch on it too much because it's been like at this point kind of exhausting for us because we know the mess that is the WWE title picture. And I told you this the other day, and it actually was on SmackDown, so there was proof. But even though the Universal belt and the WWE belt are now defunct, not only does Reigns wear the gold belt, but Heyman is still holding the blue and black belt on his shoulders as they walk out to the ring. And I wanted to get your thoughts on the fact that Reigns now holds three, even though two are defunct, belts.
Well, I mean, I don't think the situation has gotten any better. I don't think the situation has gotten any worse. I guess I like the idea of having one specific belt. Just if he's gonna be, and again, you, they call him undisputed, but we can't really say that because there's another world champ. So it's not really undisputed, but if they're going to call him, the undisputed universal champion, whatever, I think that there should be just one specific belt for that. So I like the idea of just one specific belt. I don't, because we've been talking about this belt situation and the fact that there's just too many belts. And, as far as this goes, oddly enough, I don't necessarily hate it, because I watched SmackDown this past Friday, and of course, Bloodline was being featured all over the episode because we were waiting for Jay's answer, and every time we saw the Bloodline, we saw Heyman with those two belts, and I didn't necessarily hate it. I think for me, the fact that Roman is wearing the one belt, holding up the one belt, not really looking to Paul Heyman to take either of those two titles. He's simply focusing on the new title that he has, and Paul Heyman is just kind of carrying those around as part of the presentation. For me, I don't really mind it that much, to be honest, and I thought I really wouldn't be. I thought I wouldn't really be, too thrilled with seeing three belts, but doesn't really bother me at this point for some reason. I don't know. What do you think?
I think after watching SmackDown, I did like that even though they were there and it existed, Reigns, like you said, didn't acknowledge them. They were in the background while Reigns was holding the gold belt up in the air. So even though they were still technically a part of the bloodline, Reigns didn't acknowledge either one, so they're just kind of there.
Sure. It makes sense, I think. And from what I understand, I heard the talk that they were apparently going to continue to be a part of the presentation because they both represented lineages of the belts going backwards. So, I mean, if I look at it from that perspective, and I think what you said was the key point, you know, he's not focusing on it,
Yeah.
and we're okay with that. So I think that's the important thing is that, he's only focusing on that one belt. Uh, I will say, and I'll just throw this out there quickly because I don't want to get into a huge discussion about this, but I'm telling you, this bloodline storyline is coming down to Jay and Sammy because before Jay went to the ring, who was the last person he saw? Sammy. I'm
Sammy.
telling you, this
No, I
bloodline
know.
storyline.
Listen, you've been preaching it since day one that this is your prediction, and I still am on the other side that Jay and Sammy can be a story in Bloodline, but I truly think that Reigns is like the A part of the story, and then you can call Sammy
Yeah,
and Jay
I
like the
mean,
B.
yeah,
But
I
I
don't know.
think
It's
that Heyman's the one, man. I think now more than ever you can see that Heyman's the one.
I don't know.
And
It's there's so many layers to this thing. So are you excited for the tag team match they announced for Money in the Bank?
yes, I literally had a discussion earlier with my brother about it. Always shutting him out. But that's literally the only people I really talk to about wrestling nowadays are you and my brother.
Mhm.
So, but oh, so
Yeah, I'm excited. I think it's
but we were,
you
yeah,
know
we were
I've
just talking about how he asked me who I thought was gonna win, and I didn't have a definite answer because on one hand you could have Reigns and Solo beat the Usos and they can carry on the feud by some sort of cheap way of winning, have Heyman help out, or you give Usos the clean win, and they probably get the biggest pop in London if they win Reigns and Solo clean.
mhm. Well, here's my question now. Do watching everything we're watching with the bloodline now, has this made you completely forget about Cody and Roman? Like, are you now thinking about Jay and Roman? Because for me, that has 100% happened. Like, at the moment, with Cody, I'm more interested in seeing what he does with other people. And quite honestly, I mean, I don't even think about Cody and Roman anymore. And if Jay was the one to take the title from Roman, I would not be upset in the slightest that it wasn't Cody.
No, I mean I've been saying that for a while. I mean, me and you have been saying that that could be an option if they don't do Cody Roman 2 at Mania, they can do Reigns and Jay, and that'd be the penultimate like finale to the Bloodline saga.
Sure. And I think I just get the feeling that we're getting closer and closer to that and further away from Cody and Roman. And not that I think that there's anything wrong with that, but I mean, I think this bloodline storyline has been, planned out years at a time. Like
I mean,
I think if we
they
end up
had to.
going, yeah, I think if we end up going with Jay and Roman, I don't see that we're going with Jay and Roman just because of what's happening. I feel like that was all a deliberate plan.
Oh yeah, I mean I think it makes sense because they literally it would be a full circle because you got to remember how the head of the table storyline started. It was Jay that was his first opponent for the belt when they brought him back as the tribal chief.
Sure.
And then from there, it went from him being against him to him being kind of forced and manipulated to be with him. And all
Mhm.
these years, he's been manipulated by his cousin, and Jimmy had to be the one to snap him out of it.
Yeah.
And now that he's
Yeah.
snapped out of it, he can say, okay, now I'm against you again. Let's try this for a third or fourth time, and I can beat you, and I'll prove it to you.
All right. So I got one last question and then we can move on. Which got the louder pop? Sammy hitting Roman with the chair, Jimmy super kicking Roman at the premium live event, or Jay kicking Roman on SmackDown?
Honestly, I thought it was Sammy at first, but I think Jay on SmackDown was, I mean, the roof popped off, man.
Mm-hmm.
It was insane. I think Sammy's was pretty loud, and it was, don't get me wrong. But I've watched that back at least 5 times because it's just so good.
No, it
And
is.
the crowd is just so hot. I think they
Yeah.
were
Oh,
definitely
it's
louder
crazy.
than when Jimmy hit Reigns, for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was thinking about it, and I think that when you look at Sammy and you look at Jimmy, both of those things were expected.
Yeah.
Everything they were kind of leading up to, I don't think Jay was as expected. Maybe not at that moment, especially at the point where he told Jimmy, "You're out." Like
Yeah.
that was so beautifully played by Jay. Like that was so good. The acting was amazing. Just playing that up, and he didn't jump into it. He said, "You're out," and then he stopped and waited, and he gave
The
it time to
best
breathe, and then he said,
pause, I
"Yes."
think, ever. The perfectly timed pause was what made that segment so good.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And they always talk about how Roman gets everyone else over that's in the angle with him. I don't know, man. Jay's doing enough work that I think at this point he's getting himself over because this everything the last couple of weeks with him have just been fantastic. All of his interactions with Heyman, just everything that he's done in the last couple of weeks has been great. And I love the fact that he kept saying to Heyman, if I'm in, that means you're out.
Yeah,
And
that was
I
great.
thought that was great. Yeah,
I
that was
thought that was
really cool.
genius. And then I loved Reigns' answer when, Jay put him on the spot. It's either him or me. And Reigns is like, no, this is my wise man. When you get to be the chief, you can have your own, but this is my guy. I can't just get rid of him. So it's like,
That
sorry,
that
you don't
was
get a choice. But it was great. Great
that
answer.
was
Just a great,
intelligent.
that whole segment was just like perfectly crafted, as
Oh
has
yeah.
been the storyline for the last year and a half, 2 years. Um, it's just been so good. And like, I don't know what's going to happen when it finally ends. Like, that's been the longest storyline they've had in recent history. Like, where do you go from there when it ends?
So I've been waiting for Roman to drop the title for a while simply because I've been more interested in the idea of Roman being on the island of relevancy by himself and having to like what happens to Roman after everybody else is gone, because I think Solo's going to turn eventually.
Oh
I,
yeah,
I think I think Roman's going to and once it's just Roman, Heyman's gone.
oh
Like
yeah,
Heyman will walk, especially if
yep.
Roman loses the title. Heyman's gone, and I think once it's Roman by himself, for me, I think it's going to be like when Sergeant Slaughter turned into an Iraqi sympathizer, and then when he gave that up and he went on like the campaign to win his country back and become a good guy again. I think it's going to be like a redemption story like that for Reigns. I
Yeah,
don't think we'll see it. I don't think we'll see it right away because I think probably after Roman drops the title, he's going to take some time off, which fine, whatever.
yeah,
But I do think that eventually we'll see a redemption story like that as well.
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if after all of this is over, they turn Reign into like a super babyface, and this time it works rather than them trying to force feed us
Yeah,
the last 6 years.
absolutely.
Like that could like literally be his redemption arc after he, realizes that he needs his family more than ever now that he's lost them.
Yeah, yeah. He's lost everything, and you know what? When he's lost everything, and it's time for him to when he finally realizes like everything that he's lost, that's when the Rock steps in.
Yeah,
That's when the Rock shows up.
that's when The Rock
I
steps in.
would not be surprised if he loses the title at Mania and Rock comes out, because I think that's where you start building that story.
Yeah. Oh, so you think you have Mania and Rock? I mean Mania, The Rock and Reigns for Mania 41.
I think we're gonna try and build towards that because I think that's the next part of the storyline, because I feel like eventually The Rock is gonna have to deal with the fact that Roman has been running roughshod over the family and calling himself the tribal chief and the head of the table when, you know, The Rock has not even been considered at all. I think that's how you still get The Rock involved.
Yeah,
Everybody thought it was going to be Rock and Roman at 39, and then Rock was out, and so everybody's like, "Well, we're moving on from that." But I think that's how you because I think Rock and Roman I think that's money. That's the big money draw, and I
Yeah,
think that's how you continue to
absolutely.
make. I think that's how you continue to make the big money with Roman, even after we've sort of passed the Bloodline storyline because the Bloodline has just imploded.
Yeah,
So I think
which
that's how you
again,
continue to make money with him.
I'm more excited now to see how Solo's reaction is going to be when he turns on Roman.
Oh
Because
yeah,
then you
because I
can literally compare all four and see which one had the louder pop: Jay, Jimmy, Sammy, or Solo.
yeah, because I think so. I think Solo's going to turn on him um, fairly soon. I think Solo's going to want a title shot. I think Solo's going to want a shot because I think Solo's going to be a little offended that he wasn't considered the right hand man. He wasn't considered the next tribal chief. Like he's third down the line.
Yep.
He's just the enforcer. And he's honestly been saving Roman's title. So I think eventually he's going to be like, well, what about me? Where's my title shot? Where's my, grooming? I
Yeah,
think that's
exactly.
I think that's going to be a big storyline. So I'm excited for that too.
Yeah, I just the Bloodline story has been so good, and again, it's gonna be one of those things where once it's over, one, we probably will never have a long-term storyline telling like that with them ever again, at least not in recent times. And
Yeah,
two, again, like we said, where does it go after that? Like,
yeah, I think that's going to be the interesting
so
part of it.
I'm very intrigued to see where it goes from there. But
Yeah, just so many layers to that storyline that there's so many things that have to be dealt with and where things go from there. So yeah, awesome. All right, so now that we got our weekly bloodline discussion out of the way, we can hit our main topic for the week, which is also going to be our main topic of discussion for the week, because we've got a lot to unpack here. So we are talking top five heels, top five heel moments of all time, which we've turned into top six because I could not make a decision and cut one
nope,
of my six.
me neither.
So Sean said, "Hey, I got six too." So all right.
Let's just do
So
six.
did you number yours?
Sort of. I mean, I just go off of it by what I've written out. So
Okay.
I guess
Yeah,
you can say
that's that's
it's
fine
a
because I
it's a
didn't.
top, but I do definitely have a number one, and I still have a feeling that we might be very similar, but we'll see
Yeah,
where it goes. We'll see where
I
it goes.
definitely have a number one, and I kind of have an idea how I want them to go, but I really didn't number them. So, all right. So let's go with your first pick.
My first pick, no one ever would have thought of this one because we all knew him for a good chunk as Bradshaw from the APA. But
Oh.
when they brought him back in 2004 and he became like the centerpiece of SmackDown and he was their longest reigning champion, that was one of the best, I think, years, not only for JBL, but as a heel, one of the best heel champions of that era. Hands down.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, JBL's heel work, it's just it speaks for itself. If you look at, and I always kind of look at ECW One Night Stand where all the WWE guys came in the balcony and were sitting there and they were just kind of going back and forth. I mean, to me, that was kind of a shining example of how good of a heel Bradshaw was. Because, I mean, he really honestly didn't have to say anything, and that crowd already hated him. And then every time he did say something, it was just, you talk about this idea of heels and what a heel should really be. And the fact that we don't have a lot of heels in the business these days that are really doing heel things. That's a guy that everything he did was 100% complete heel. He never chased the hug, never looked for approval. It was just a bad guy from start to finish.
And if you want to talk about moments that defined an era, his feud with Eddie Guerrero, done. His chair shot at Judgment Day to Eddie Guerrero will live in infamy because of just how crazy that became.
Mm-hmm.
Just the whole fact that he despised the fact that Mexicans were entering the United States illegally, and he believed that Eddie Guerrero was the epitome of what was wrong with America, and he
Mm-hmm.
vowed to take the title from him and set everything right. And it was just a bloodletting, brutal match,
Oh yeah.
and it was just it like defined that whole feud, and it really just brought it back to full circle. But it was just a perfect Like that whole year for him was just great. I think
Yeah,
he's looked down on. That's why I think that's why I have him so low on the list, because
mhm.
nobody really appreciates that run. I think more than they realize, because he made people during the run, but he was also one of the best heels that year.
Yeah, you know, his match with Eddie Guerrero up until recently was probably, you know, one of the bloodiest matches of all time. You know, Steve Macklin and PCO recently was just a bloodletting nightmare. But I mean, yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. I think that his title run during that time was just so underappreciated. People just don't give him enough credit for that. And yeah, he was just I mean a great heel, and definitely definitely a big moment for heels, and a big moment, like you said, for that era, for that SmackDown era. It was a huge you know, a huge shift where now you had this, you know, massive heel who was just consistently a heel day in and day out, you know, running roughshod with that title and doing whatever he could in very heelish manners to you know, keep that belt around him. I mean, you know, think about some of the guys. You know, you had Orlando Jordan, you had the Basham brothers. You know, he did whatever he could do and made sure that he had whoever around him he could to help him keep that belt in the most heelish of ways all the
Oh yeah,
time.
I mean, he sort of had not really a bloodline, but he had, the cabinet,
Sure.
which helped him get some of his reigns and keep his reign longer. But like at the time, that brand had no real main event talent. So what do? You bring in Bradshaw, completely change his gimmick from this beer drinking Texan to a loudmouth New York businessman who made millions in stock exchange and was going to push his views on the fans of WWE. And it was a match made in heaven.
And honestly, I think his commentary work is very underrated too, because you don't have a whole lot of people who really stay as a heel through, you know, their commentary run. You know, there's a lot of switching back and forth, and you know, but he was just always the consummate heel. So yeah, excellent way to start off your list.
Before we get into your number 6,
Yep.
for the fans that do not know, real quick, a heel is a bad guy, babyface is a good guy. Just so you guys understand, when we say these things, heel is bad, babyface good. Okay. What is
Excellent.
your number 6
Very good. All
top
right.
heel?
So now that we've got that straightened out, so for my number 6, and I actually, so I'm gonna start off with Bret Hart, but it's
Ooh,
interesting
okay.
because I'm not gonna pick the Bret Hart moment that everybody assumes that I'm probably going to pick, which is, I think, the moment that everyone would pick, which is the double turn at WrestleMania 13.
I thought you were
But
going to say
that's
the moment where he pushed Vince.
no, and I actually don't know. I don't even have that moment. So, if you remember correctly, and this is one of my favorite matches of all time. If you remember the In Your House Canadian Stampede, the
Mm,
5-on-5 main event, that match was phenomenal. The entrances alone for the Hart Foundation, that was one of the things I brought up when we were talking about top factions of all time, and again, one of my reasons for picking the Hart Foundation. But if you remember that night, the following night on Monday Night Raw, they were still in Canada. They were in Edmonton, Alberta, and Bret Hart cuts the promo where he says, "I am not anti-American. I am pro-Canadian." And he starts
yeah.
talking about how Canada still takes care of their sick. You know,
hmm
they still care about each other. They still help each other out. They still have health care. That promo, Bret Hart actually had. I was at a signing one time up in Canada. It was the first time that Bret, Jim the Anvil, and Jimmy Hart had been together for a signing in probably 20, 25 years. and he had shirts made up that had that speech on the back of it. That speech,
Yeah,
I feel right there, was the moment that really solidified not only Bret Hart as a heel, but why Bret Hart was such a great heel and why Bret Hart was such a game changing, momentum changing heel for the business of wrestling. Because here's a guy who did everything heelish, and everyone in America hated them. And the minute they set foot in Canada, he was a bigger hero than anybody else on the show. It didn't matter what he did, what he said, everything that he had just done the week before in America was now the same things that he was doing, and yet he was being cheered for it. So I feel like that was a very groundbreaking moment where you had someone who could be a huge heel in one respect, and then the very next week be a huge baby face to all the fans in Canada. And for me, I felt like that was a big moment for heels because I think it showed a different way that they could do heels.
yeah. And if you want to talk about comparisons, I think what Bret Hart with Canada was back then, MJF is to New York now. He is the
Yeah.
biggest heel everywhere else, but as soon as he gets into his hometown, he is revered, he is cheered, he is
Mm-hmm.
popped to no end. It's the craziest freaking thing. And to have Bret Hart
Yeah.
do that back then was like so groundbreaking because you didn't hear that reaction often where you had a heel in like the US and then as soon as he goes back to Canada, he's revered. Like it's
Oh,
crazy.
it was incredible. At one time, one of the top magazines in Canada did a poll of Canadians all over, and they asked them what their top 5 Canadians of all time were, and Bret Hart made the top 3, which is insane for a
That's pretty big.
wrestler. I'll
That's
tell
pretty
you,
big.
I went to the autograph signing I was talking about that I went to in Canada. When I went up there for the autograph signing, I got to the border, and as I was crossing the border, I had to go through customs. And when I got into customs, they asked me where I was going, and I simply said, I'm going to a wrestling show tonight. Now, the wrestling show was probably 25 minutes from the town and the border there. And literally every customs agent in that office knew exactly what I was going to see. The first guy was like, "Oh, you're going to see Bret Hart, aren't you?"
Yeah.
And as soon as he said Bret Hart, all the other customs agents, their ears perked up, and they all knew what he was talking about. They all knew where I was going. Bret Hart is just, it is a phenomenon unlike anything else I can relate it to. He is just, it won't matter what he does ever. I mean, he could be, murdering people. It doesn't matter what he does.
Yeah.
Bret Hart is going to be a hero to the Canadian people. And I don't mean that, Bret Hart's going to go out and murder people, but
No.
yeah, it's just, my sort of figure of speech there. I feel like, Bret Hart just is going to be a hero to them no matter what. And you're exactly right. Cause now, MJF is a great example, but you do see certain people that are hated quite a few places, but then when they go to their hometown or their home state, they sort of get that hometown reaction where elsewhere they might not get that same reaction. So yeah, groundbreaking I think is the word that really sums it up. But I don't think enough people really look at it that much where they look at, like that was the night that he really kind of, I feel he really solidified himself as a hero in Canada, which made him an even bigger heel in the United States.
Yeah. That was a great pick. I can see why you didn't want to miss that one from the list for sure.
Yeah. I just, yeah. So, all right. What's your next pick?
My number 5, I think he needs no introduction. I'm just gonna say the Macho Man, Randy Savage, the cream of the crop.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy was celebrated for all his contributions, yes, but he was one of the best heels. He snubbed all the managers in WWF and instead chose the beautiful Miss Elizabeth to be his valet instead. All the while, every promo they did with her, he treated her so poorly. And while the fans fell in love with Miss Elizabeth, they started to hate Savage because of how poorly he treated poor Miss Elizabeth. And he just made them hate him more and more every week because of how bad she was treated.
For as good as a good guy that the Macho Man was at times, he was just so much better as a heel. And I feel like he's one of those guys where you look at the things he did as a heel and he just kept upping his game. Like
By
it
the
just
time he dumped Miss Elizabeth for Sensational Sherry, fans wanted nothing more than to see him get his comeuppance.
mhm.
Nothing more. They're like, how dare you drop Miss Elizabeth for the Sensational Sherry of all people?
Yeah.
The Macho King, man, if you will. The Macho King. And,
Yeah.
even that was a crazy pairing, too.
Oh
Him and
sure.
Sherry.
That I mean that was a great pairing because a lot of times you look at Sherry Martel and she was the mouthpiece for a lot of people that she was with because she was so good at it.
Oh, she was just
But
amazing.
here you had a pairing where you had two people that could just go out there every night and just go back and forth trying to outdo each other.
Yeah.
And having that as heels, I mean they were just they were so perfect together. I mean, I think I actually like their pairing better than I do Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth. Even when they got back together, I always thought the Macho King, despite the fact that it wasn't a world title, I always thought that the Macho King, title for him was a much better fit. I thought it meant much more than the world title because I mean you got guys that are to steal a line from Charlotte Flair this past week. I mean you got guys out there that are champions with or without a belt, and he is definitely one of those guys that's a champion with or without a belt.
Yeah. And you want to talk about moments. The whole lead up to WrestleMania 5 is some of my favorite Randy Savage promos ever. The Mega Powers Explode was probably my favorite of that year. Was just such a cool way to turn Randy Savage heel, and he did some of his best work leading up to WrestleMania 5.
I watched that Saturday night main event match with him and Hogan against the Twin Towers. I watch that all the time because I I just think that's such brilliant storytelling. And honestly, I love in the back where Macho throws Hogan into a table in the medical room and like medical supplies just go everywhere.
Yeah, it's just a mess.
Oh yeah, that was such a good build up. The Mega Powers Explode was absolutely brilliant. Especially just I mean they basically planted the seeds at WrestleMania 4
Yep.
because Macho was never happy that Elizabeth went and got Hogan to
Nope.
come down to the ring to even up the odds. He never was happy with that. So, I think they kind of, and to be honest, I mean, as much as Hulk Hogan was a, good friend and tag team partner to the Macho Man, I don't think he was ever quite comfortable with, being second banana to the world champion. So,
Yeah,
there was
because
a
he
lot
wanted to
going
be
on
that
there.
in that top spot. So having to kind of
Yeah.
be sidekick to Macho probably didn't feel very good.
No, probably not. So, you know, yeah, I always felt that Macho Man was a much better heel, and a lot of great moments from him.
And it was because of his heel run that he became such a great babyface. I think he had to be heel first, gain
Mhm.
that sympathy, and then when he did turn face, people absolutely loved him. But he had to
Oh
be a
yeah,
great heel first before he can be a even better babyface.
yeah. I mean, the ovation when Sherry was just kicking him in the ring at WrestleMania 7, and then
It was
Elizabeth
so
jumps out of the
loud,
crowd. Oh, they went
so loud.
bananas. Yeah, really cool. So
All
yeah,
right,
definitely some heel moments there.
what's your number 5
Okay, so let me ask you a question. If you're
answer?
gonna look at the Montreal Screwjob, who would you say is the biggest heel in that entire situation?
I mean, I would say Michaels, but I'm going to say McMahon.
Okay, so I have a different take on it because here's the thing. McMahon lied. Shawn Michaels lied. Triple H lied. Earl Hebner lied. Because Brett went up to Earl and asked him flat out, and Earl said he knew nothing about it, which was a total lie.
Yep.
Everybody was in on it. I'm sure Patterson and Briscoe lied at one point about it because I'm sure they were questioned as well. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm sure they were. So everybody that knew about it lied. It was a bad situation all around, but it was a situation that could have been avoided because the ultimate heel in the whole situation is the one that we feel the most sympathy for because of a wrestling movie. Bret Hart, again, and I'm picking Bret Hart for a second time here because I feel like...
Bret Hart?
What's that?
Is that double Bret Hart? Is that even
double Bret Hart? Listen,
possible?
I'm picking Bret Hart for a second time because I believe that he was the biggest heel in the entire Montreal Screwjob. So here's the situation, and here's where I feel he comes in as the biggest heel. So Vince signs him to this huge, $10 million multi-year contract, and then the business is what it is, and Vince can't afford to pay him. So Vince calls him in the office and says, I can't afford to pay you what we agreed to pay you. He offered to help him get a job at WCW because he knew that, WCW was just opening the checkbook and spending whatever they could. So a plan was devised for Bret to drop the title at Survivor Series.
Yeah.
Bret said, no, I don't want to drop the title at Survivor Series. I will go over with Michaels. We'll do whatever kind of finish you want, but I will go over at Survivor Series. And then the next night on Raw, I will come out and I will relinquish the title. Bret did not want to do business. He did not want to do the time-honored business of doing the job on his way out for someone else, mainly because it was Michaels, because they had such ridiculous heat with each other.
They had beef, big beef.
Over the years. And so he did not want to do the job to Michaels. But that's not how you do business. So, I can't really blame Vince for being concerned that if Bret left Survivor Series with the title, that the title might end up on Monday Nitro, because he'd seen it once already with Alundra Blaze when she took her title back and went back to being Medusa and threw it in a garbage can on Monday Nitro. So I can't blame him for, feeling that could happen again. This entire situation could have been easily avoided if Bret would have just said, you know what, let's figure out a way to make it happen. I'll lose the title to Michaels. No big deal. Because it really, I feel like the Bret Hart myth and the Bret Hart mythos and the legend of Bret Hart and who Bret Hart was all in Bret's head. I feel like Bret really felt like if he went out there and lost to Shawn, that it would tarnish his reputation. Now, any wrestler worth their salt will tell you wins and losses don't matter because some people go over and some people get over. Like, you do not have to win a match to get over. It's not the way it works. It's not the way the wrestling business works. It's not the way fans work. You can be the most you can be the most popular guy in the country and lose every single match, and fans will still love you. It's just the way it is. And I feel like Bret had it in his head that, like, I can't lose this match, or the fans are going to think less of Bret Hart because he lost this match. That the fans are going to think less of Bret Hart because he was going to WCW because they didn't know the whole story.
Yeah.
But I don't think they were going to think less of him because he lost to Shawn Michaels. So it is my contention that Bret Hart is the biggest heel in this whole story. And the fact that he, was, and I mean, he's 100% right in saying he was screwed over. Vince screwed him over.
Oh, that's no question.
But I feel like Vince did what he had to do. I'm on Vince's side on this one because when Vince says Bret screwed Bret, without Vince actually getting into any specifics, that statement right there, Bret screwed Bret, I fully subscribe to that because I feel like if Bret simply would have just agreed to do the job and just move on, what's the big deal here? It's the time honored tradition. Many have done it before. Many will do it again. And I don't think that anything that Brett could have done on his way out of WWE would have tarnished his legacy. But, we had that movie that painted him as this sort of sympathetic victim in the whole thing. But, nobody talks about how, Vince tried to help him. And then, Vince was a man about it. Vince went to him and said, "Hey, I can't pay you, but I can help you get another job."
Yeah.
And then Brett did not want to play ball.
No, he offered Brett to go to a different company, which Vince, that's like crazy to even think about.
It's unheard of.
It's unheard of, exactly. So the fact that Vince even tried to help him out and then Brett still said no, I kind of think that Vince felt like he was backed into a corner and he had to do something. So that's why they had the Montreal Screwjob, because Vince felt like he was cornered and it was either we keep the belt on our side or we don't pay Brett. We have to play the ball back, basically.
Sure. Absolutely. So, yep, there you have it. Bret Hart's on my list twice.
As long as he's not on your entire list.
No, definitely not. All right. What is your next pick?
Mine is one that everyone loves to hate only because of his past. He was in the real world at one point. He was also on a season of Tough Enough. But Mike the Miz Mizanin, I think, should have been one of my underrated picks from a few weeks ago, because, man, nobody believed that this guy from the real world could come in there and wrestle and do what everybody else does. But he came in there and just proved everyone wrong and just became naturally like one of the biggest heels because nobody believed in his ability to be in the ring. And he was so good at soaking it all in, which makes him that much better as a heel to hate him. And, he has all these accolades now, so you can't say that he's not great. But for so long, and even to his day, as many great matches as he's had, he's such a massive heel that nobody cares. And I feel like at times he's underappreciated for his heel work, but he has done such great heel work in the last 10 or so years that he's been with the business. Like, he's better as a heel than a face, 100%.
Oh, absolutely. And here's a guy that we can talk about that, he loses every week. Like, the guy loses all the time. He probably loses more than, anybody else on TV. And, he is still always in the public eye. He's always, he still elicits reactions from the fans. You look at, and they did one of my absolute favorite video packages of all time at WrestleMania when he defended the title against John Cena, and they did the promo before the match to Nas, and I thought that was perfect because it started all the way back from when he was on the Real World, and it went through his time on Miz TV, and it just it showed him talking about how nobody thought he was going to make it and nobody believed in him, and here he was main eventing a WrestleMania. And that's one of my favorite video packages they've ever done because it really highlights just how good he is. Just the fact that he succeeded as a heel is a huge moment.
Everybody wrong, and not only did he become a great heel, he became, in my opinion, has to be up there with some of the greats for sure. Like, he is so good at what he does in the ring. And what he does in the ring is able to keep his career longer because he doesn't need, the way he wrestles is more safe than most wrestlers. So he's barely been injured his entire career. I think the injury that was recently was his first big injury in however many years that he's been with the company, because he's wrestles in a way where it's still safe, where he can't get hurt, so he can wrestle for longer.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a guy like The Miz, who nobody gave a chance to at all, and look at everything he's been able to accomplish. World champion, main evented WrestleMania, beat John Cena at WrestleMania.
Grand Slam
Television
champion,
star,
two-time
Grand Slam champion, television star, movie star. Met and married his wife in WWE. Like everything this guy has been able to accomplish. I mean, wrestlers should look at him and pattern themselves after what he's been able to do because nobody gave him a chance at all. And he just took it straight to the moon. I mean, talk about a rocket strapper.
And you want to talk about defining moments? What's more defining than the episode of Talking Smack with Daniel Bryan? And Miz did some of the best promo work
so good
for the IC belt that I've ever heard. It was such empowered, impassioned, heel, but almost sympathetic face speech. But it was just the way he delivered it was just perfect. As soon as Bryan called him a coward, I said, "This is it. It's over."
Yeah,
Bryan said the wrong word.
And what was
wrong place, wrong time.
What was great about it was that it was all real. It was what he really felt, and to let those two go out there and just kind of speak from the heart and really speak emotionally about how they were feeling about things at that moment. It made it so much better, and that was the beauty of Talking Smack. Is that that show let people really go out there and just say what they really truly felt, and it made for some magical moments, and that's probably the greatest moment that Talking Smack ever had. And if you've never seen it, go to YouTube and look it up right now. Talking Smack, The Miz and Daniel Bryan. You will be blown away.
Again, do that, pause this, watch that, come back to us. We'll wait here. It's fine.
Yeah, we'll wait. Okay, you're back. Good.
Okay, we're good.
Yeah. So when you talk about heels and just everything the Miz has been able to accomplish, his whole career is a defining moment.
I mean, even to this day, fans still don't want to believe that he's been wrestling not only for more than a decade, but he's a good wrestler. He's good on the mic. He's good in the ring. Some fans still just don't want to believe it, but he is, in my opinion, that good.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So my next pick is something that I think was a moment in itself for a heel, but also precipitated one of the biggest moments in wrestling history and something that changed the professional wrestling business forever. And I'm talking about Andre the Giant when he turned heel and went against Hulk Hogan on Piper's Pit, tore the shirt, tore the cross off,
and that said was just a crazy moment.
Said he wanted a title shot, and you had 93,000 people at WrestleMania 3, changed the business forever, took the business to new heights. I heard an interview a couple weeks ago with a gentleman by the name of Keith Elliott Greenberg, who is writing a book about the impact that WrestleMania 3 had on the wrestling business and how it changed everything moving forward. And quite honestly, you had a lot of matches on that card, but what were people really there to see? People were there to see Andre the Giant and Hogan. Why? Because Andre the Giant had been, undefeated for how many years? Andre and Hogan had been great friends. I always kind of felt like Andre was not a great baby face. I mean, people loved him, but I just didn't. I felt like he really did his best work as a heel with Bobby Heenan, and so you had this guy who was Hulk Hogan's best friend, and he turns on him and Hogan doesn't even see it coming. Hogan is the last one to figure out anything's happening. I mean, first off, Hogan's on Piper's Pit. So number one, he should know that something's up. And I feel like he should have seen it coming, but he didn't. And that made it even bigger. But But that moment, that challenge for the title, that absolutely 100% built the house that WrestleMania 3, built the foundation of the house, to be honest. Because, while there were other matches, and there were great matches at WrestleMania 3, you had a lot of good stuff going on. But people were there to see Andre and Hogan. People
That
wanted
was
to
the
see what was going to
marquee
happen.
match, was Andre and Hogan.
Yeah, there
Like,
was, if anybody
was
told you they were
the
there for
main
something
photo
else,
on the poster was just Andre and Hogan, and then always the "and more" on the bottom.
yeah, I've got a great black and white poster in the man cave here, coming up the stairs to the man cave. That's the black and white photo with the stare down of Andre and Hogan before WrestleMania 3, and I mean, it's just it's got to be considered, and off the back of one match. Not that the other matches were not great, but WrestleMania 3 has got to be considered, one of the top WrestleManias of all time, just for the impact that it had on the business. Because think about it, you had, and this was a great point I heard somebody make during the Keith Elliott Greenberg interview, was that, they just got done watching 93,000 fans at WrestleMania, and they were going to go back to watching, 200 fans, watch an event with 200 fans in a gym. Like, you just saw 93,000 people attend WrestleMania, and that took the business to new heights. It made the business elevate its game. It was good for business for everybody. Everybody sort of gained from that, but it really made professional wrestling up its game, because once you saw something like that, you couldn't go back to, 200 people in a smoky filled gym, or, even some of like the Madison Square Garden stuff, and, the Garden being what it is, even then, like, it's just not the same as watching 93,000 fans go nuts for something. And really, that whole entire event and that whole entire change in business was precipitated by Andre turning on Hogan.
Yeah, that's where it all started, and even that whole build up to to Mania 3 was just so good. Again, similar to Hogan and Macho Man, the Hogan and Andre build up was just so cool for its time, so career changing for both of them. Like, it was just, and it was also the first time people saw on TV when Hogan body slammed Andre.
Yeah, and this says a lot about Andre, because anybody that knew anything about wrestling, anybody that was in the ring with Andre, anybody that knew Andre would tell you, listen, you weren't going to do something if Andre didn't want you to do it. So for Andre to allow all that stuff, and he, from what I understand, he was not in great health going into that match. He was not in great health going into WrestleMania 3. So, in a lot of chronic pain, due to his condition. And so for him to do all of that, for him to, pass the torch on to Hogan, so to speak, because I mean, we've talked about like certain things in wrestling, like, the Undertaker's streak at WrestleMania, and then what it meant for somebody to beat the Undertaker. Well, that's pretty much the same thing with Andre. Like, the rub that you get off of that, the sort of prestige that you get from having that on your resume, that you beat Andre the Giant at WrestleMania. I mean, that's something that people still talk about to this day, and that's one of the biggest things people will always remember Hulk Hogan for, is, like you said, just that visual of him body slamming Andre at Mania. Like, that's such an iconic moment. It's in the intro to WWE television shows. Like, that's like one of the main moments they always show no matter what, because
Yeah,
it's
because it
so
was a
iconic.
defining moment. Yeah, it was a defining moment of the era, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, what is your next pick?
My next pick is arguably one of my favorite heels, even though he's not number one. But he's so much better as a heel than a face. And the Viper, the Legend Killer, the Apex Predator, whatever name you want to give him, Randy Orton, man. Even during the Ruthless Aggression era in Evolution as the Legend Killer, he just did some of his best work as a heel. Like the Legend Killer gimmick was amazing. When he faced like Foley and all them was just awesome. And then even when he branched off of Evolution, my defining moment for him, or at least you could call it the defining year, was 2009 when he feuded with the McMahons and he punts Vince for real, and the whole crowd just goes silent.
Yeah.
And then his acting afterwards, as if he broke from a spell and was shocked that he hit Vince, was just so perfect. Like, and even then, when he did it to him, he did it to Shane. He RKO'd Stephanie. He literally hurt every McMahon on his way to Triple H, leading up to that match of Mania. And it was just such a cool. Like he literally turned into this more violent and sadistic side, and he did it to perfection.
Yeah. For me, if I had to pick a defining moment, I think, when he RKO'd Steph, Triple H was handcuffed to the ropes,
Watching,
he made out with Steph right there
Yeah.
in front of Triple
Yep.
H. Like
Just
that to me, that's the real definition of a heel right there. Like that's going above and beyond to show what a heel you are. His Legend Killer days are just some great stuff. Really just, I mean, if you look at that time, finding maybe a bigger heel is not the right way to look at it, but finding a better quality heel, you're going to be hard pressed to find somebody that just, put in the same amount of work that he put in to being a heel. He had this great persona, this great gimmick that he just he lived and breathed it. It was such a great such a great heel gimmick, because I think a lot of it was built on just this the arrogance to think that he was just simply better than everyone else and nobody could touch him. Like that shone through in everything that he did.
Yeah, he became this like crazed snake-like heel who punted his opponents just out of sheer enjoyment, just for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And to think that was ever a bad heel is crazy. Because again, every time he hit somebody with a punt, he like would get this weird like enjoyment out of it. Like he would like relish in it, like crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Like he made you scared of him, like scared of him. Like what what else could he possibly do to this family? Traumatize them, basically.
Oh yeah. Yeah. In recent years, I feel like more recent wrestling fans, have no idea of how good Randy Orton really is, because they only get to see, like the RK Bro baby stuff, or baby face stuff that we're going through now. Most recently, and they don't really get to see, unless they go back and watch, old pay-per-views or Raw and SmackDown and stuff like that. They don't really get to see how genius he really is.
Dude,
I think that shows through in his heel side.
Absolutely, like, and then don't get me wrong, I've been greatly enjoying his face run with Riddle the last few years. I've been greatly enjoying it, but he's just to me so much better as a heel because he just gets it. He just understands the mindset of how to make you just completely loathe the guy in every way.
Oh, absolutely. RK Bro is good. Rated RKO is great.
Yeah, Radar Car again. Just he whether he was in a team, whether he was in Legacy, whether he was in Evolution, what team he was in, faction he was in, whether he was solo, when he was a heel, he was on his A game. And he could just make you believe everything that he was doing was just so legit. Whether he was hitting Vince McMahon or doing the RKO to Stephanie, it just felt so like it was breaking the boundaries of like what was real and what was like, okay, this is like kind of pushing the line a little bit. What are we doing?
Sure.
Like when he hit Vince, I think that was the only one where that one was for real. Like Vince said, "You better hit me. You better connect."
Yeah,
Because
you
Vince
don't
is,
go out there
you
and
know,
mess around with him.
crazy like that.
Yeah. Yeah, just, again, for that era in time, finding somebody that put in the quality of work that he did as a heel, I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody better.
Absolutely.
Definitely puts him on the list. Which it's interesting because as we talk about Rated RKO, my next pick comes from the other member of that tag team. And for as great as Edge has been as a babyface and just a big portion of his career, there was a lot of great heel stuff, and I'll be the first to say that Edge and Christian is my favorite tag team of all time.
One of the greats
And
for sure.
and in that, I am a peep for life. I'm a much bigger Christian fan than I am Edge. Not to say that Edge did anything wrong, but I've always been a big Christian fan. But to me, that wasn't really the Edge that really exemplified what was great about him as a heel, because a lot of that was just sort of, comedic buffoonery stuff, which again, I thought everything they did was great. Asking McFoley to get them sodas, and then they just sodas rule.
It was just some of the best silly stuff. Like they were the best together.
5-second poses, the silly
come on.
glasses, dressing up as fat Elvises. I mean, like
Best.
everything they did was just insane. But for me, Edge was best as a heel when they started using some real life stuff in the situation. And again, that kind of goes back to his situation with Matt Hardy and Lita.
Yep, Edge versus
And
Matt
then-
that's all it was just based off of the fact that Lita cheated on Matt for Edge.
Sure. And they used that. And I think when you paired Edge and Lita together, I think this was where, for me, you saw the best of Edge as a heel. And the defining moment, I believe, for his, time as a heel. And this was a defining moment for other reasons because it started a trend. So when Edge cashed in his Money in the Bank on John Cena at New Year's Revolution in 2006, that was the first Money in the Bank winner, first cash in. Edge wins the title, started a trend where Money in the Bank winners were always able to successfully cash in. But this was really a heel measure here. And, again, it's kind of a mixed bag because, people were excited about the cash in. People were excited that, he was cashing in on John Cena because, this was, again, a time where, fans were very divisive about John Cena. And so there was a lot of, I feel maybe some excitement for that cash in, but still, I mean, this was an absolute heel move. I mean, John Cena had just gone through a grueling Elimination Chamber match, had managed to come out on top, and here comes Edge. And this is the moment where Edge got his nickname, the Ultimate Opportunist.
Yep.
And it really is. It became a sort of career defining moniker for him moving forward. But this was also career defining for Money in the Bank too, because it was the first ever cash in, and it started this trend of Money in the Bank winners cashing in successfully, which I believe. I mean, eventually that stopped, but you had quite a few cash-ins. You had quite a few cash-ins that were all successful in a row. So it kind of set a standard where people figured every time somebody cashed in, they were going to win the world title. But it really was I feel like a heel defining moment for him.
Yeah, I feel like that really launched his Rated R Superstar run as a heel was after he cashed in his Money. Then he really became that moniker to a T. Like him with Lita and the Matt Hardy stuff, and then all the Lita stuff that they done afterwards after they squashed that match he was just slimy. Like he was just this like you wanted to hate him because you just felt gross when he walked.
Yeah.
You're like, ugh, like no.
Well, yeah, because I mean, then I mean, you look at what happened after he won the title. Then we have the live sex celebration on
Yep.
Monday Night Raw, which was just icky to begin with.
Mhm.
And then you look at some of the things Edge was able to do after that, and I mean, his height, his run as a heel just kept, again, like we talked about with the Macho Man. I feel like he just kept building and building layers and layers. I mean, you look at look at what he did at One Night Stand. He speared John Cena to help RVD win the title,
Which
and
was
then
just
he had a tag team match with Mick Foley where they were co-hardcore champions, and they went against Tommy Dreamer and Terry Funk. And I
yeah.
mean, these are like big, huge moments for someone to have in their heel career, and I feel like it all got started that night.
I mean, another defining moment for Edge was when he speared Foley through a flaming table at Mania. That's when he was also a heel.
Yeah, definitely. That was a big moment as well. Again, just if you're looking at it, you have these career sort of heel defining moments that really, when you look at somebody's body of work as a heel, these are moments that a lot of people really can't measure up against.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I've always enjoyed Edge's heel run, especially his time with Lita. I just thought, like you said, this was the whole, really birth and solidification of the rated R superstar, and it just, it was a good time for a heel like him to, come out and just do the things that he did.
Yeah, he had to do some crazy things with some crazy talent when he was a heel, and it just pushed his status to the moon. That whole heel run, like they gave
Yeah.
him just legend after legend, and just for me, I remember when he had a feud with Cena, and he smacked Cena's dad in the face.
Oh, yeah.
Like that to me was like a whole man.
Yeah. Yeah, they did some great stuff during that feud. Didn't he go to John Cena's house?
Yeah, something
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah, he did
Yeah,
something
that
crazy.
was, yeah, so good. Again, you look at somebody like that and you instantly hate everything about them because they're just, but again, just, great examples of what a heel should really be.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah. All right. What do you got next?
My number two, not many people probably would think about because he's so beloved nowadays and always has been. But people have to remember that when The Rock debuted as Rocky Maivia, they tried making him a face as this second generation superstar, and instead of him being revered, it was die Rocky die.
Mm-hmm.
So what did they do? They made him a heel, and he used his strengths on the mic and the ability to vent his frustrations to the fans and say whatever he felt that he needed to say without fear of hurting their feelings. And he could say whatever he wants to, and he made it work. When he was in the Nation of Domination, when he joined the corporation, that to me was some of his best heel stuff in the late '90s. When he was really The Rock. But that's when The Rock, he was a heel first before he was a babyface as The Rock. And I think sometimes people forget that because again, between being in the Nation, being in the corporation, like his ego exploded as a heel in that time.
Absolutely. It's almost like his sort of birth as a heel was also really the birth and the creation of the Rock persona, and it's interesting because he gets to this point where he continues to speak of himself in third person, but it's funny when you watch some of like his older promos right when he was starting the heel turn and you don't hear him speaking in the third person. It's really kind of weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, he did a lot of good stuff as a heel very early on. He had some great feuds to be involved in. A lot of the stuff that he did with Stone Cold Steve Austin, just the back and forth when they were fighting over the Intercontinental title. I mean, just everything about him was something you wanted to hate. Like he'd come down to the ring in like a t-shirt, khaki shorts, loafers, and he'd have a fanny pack with
Yeah.
a pager on it. And you just looked at this guy and you're like, I can't stand him. Like he looks like I want to punch him in the face.
And for the time, he could put you down in a way never before seen because he was so good on the mic and so charismatic that he left you hanging on his every word. Being able to sell himself and his matches on the mic and being truly hated while doing it is not always easy, but he became a true professional at doing just that.
Absolutely. The thing about The Rock that's really interesting to me is that here you have a guy that did that kind of stuff, was very inventive in how he, kind of put people down. And then that creativity and inventiveness continued from him being a heel into him being a babyface. And then again, it came around when he became a heel again years later. He did some great work when he was a heel years later on Raw, where he had feuds with Shane Helms as the Hurricane. I mean, just some of the stuff that the two of them did together. Talking about calling the Hurricane the Hamburglar, and
Yeah.
just
Could never
when
forget that.
when he'd show up on Raw for the Rock concerts, and he'd get in the ring and sing about how terrible the city was and how he couldn't wait to leave it. Just
Yeah.
the creativity there is just off the charts with that guy.
I feel like that gets slept on too because, again, Hollywood Rock was just amazing. That whole turn, the heel run, his first match being against Goldberg, and that being the whole the start of it. And again, the way he could just bring you up to trash on you when he was that version was just hilarious to me because he would bring you up in the positive, and then as soon as you got him cheered up, he would just crash and ruin your day. Like he would just switch it, turn it right back to being a heel. He would have you by his hands and then just let it go. Like, okay. He was just so good at that.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody that can doubt that The Rock has been one of the most popular baby faces of all time and one of the most hated heels of all time. And I think it, however it happened, however it started, however they came up with the idea, I think it was, extremely intelligent to take what was happening for real at the arenas and people just chanting, die Rocky die, and to take that and, make something out of that. It's just, it's genius because you had the hatred there without even doing anything.
Yeah, no,
Like
they
there
just
was
wanted to
nothing.
build him up as this new, second generation star, and it didn't work. It just wasn't clicking.
I think people were sick of Jim
So
Ross calling him the blue chipper.
oh yeah, that might have been
That was pretty bad.
a part of it. But yeah, no, the blue chipper Rocky Maivia, that character just it was over before it even started. Let's just be honest. They tried and they're like, yeah, this isn't working.
Yeah.
Let's switch it up.
Yeah.
And thank God they did because again, he became one of the biggest heels of the Attitude Era because of it. And again, if it wasn't for heel Rock, we wouldn't have super babyface over Rock.
Sure. For me, I think, and this may be just a personal choice, but the biggest heel thing that Rock ever did in his career was putting on Stone Cold Steve Austin's vest at WrestleMania 19.
Oh, that moment will live forever in my mind.
That was just, yeah. I mean, because you don't do that.
Never.
And quite honestly, nobody could take a stunner like The Rock. It was
he
the
took
most
one of the best
impressive looking
stunners.
thing I'd ever seen.
One of the best stunner guys was The Rock.
I could never be that athletic by accident, and that guy's like killing it.
A close second for me is McAfee. The way McAfee sold the stunner at Mania 38 was just
that was good. Yeah,
top notch.
Yeah, that was really good. But I feel like he tried to draw some inspiration there. Like, who can I emulate here?
Of course.
So yeah, that's the Rock is. I mean, there will probably never be another heel like The Rock.
No, because again, he was just so good on the mic, and he just knew how to get in your feels.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. All right. So
what's your number 2?
I had a hard time with this one. And it wasn't so much what was going to be my number 2. It was how do I decide which one's number 1? Because I feel like there's two different moments here that either one of them could be number 1, but in making the decision, I got to go with this at my number 2. So let's think all the way back to WrestleMania 1, and let's talk about WrestleMania 1 a little bit. So WrestleMania 1, what's that?
Wasn't even alive yet.
I was, years old. So WrestleMania 1 was a huge gamble. WrestleMania 1 was a gigantic risk. Vince had this vision that this was going to be, the biggest wrestling event that they could possibly have, to the point where, Vince put his house on the line for this. So if WrestleMania didn't work, not only was the company going to go over, Vince was going to lose his house. This was big time stuff here. I mean, this was along the lines of what they went through during the Monday Night Wars, where they weren't sure that they were going to be able to come back in the ratings, and WWE legitimately almost went out of business during the Monday Night Wars before they were able to turn around. Yeah. And this is another one of those situations where they're gambling on something, and you have to remember WrestleMania 1 was at Madison Square Garden, which probably holds between, at that time, probably somewhere a little over 16,000, which is nothing compared to premium live events of today. But they didn't even have pay-per-view back then, so they didn't even have pay-per-view to work with. What they had was closed circuit television, and this again was Vince's idea. He was a pioneer in creating pay-per-view based on this, where they would send closed circuit feeds to movie theaters, auditoriums. They even did it in the small arena next to Madison Square Garden, and you could pay so much money to buy a ticket and go in and sit down and watch WrestleMania on closed circuit television with other wrestling fans. So, there was a lot riding on this. This was not only probably the entirety of the company, this was really the business itself, because we think about what a big deal WrestleMania is today. But if the first one had never gotten off the ground properly, if the first one had lost money and Vince lost his house, where would wrestling be today? So it was this huge gamble. And why did WrestleMania work? Well, you had a lot of reasons. You had the celebrity involvement. You had Billy Martin from the Yankees. You had Liberace. You had, Mr. T. You had all these, different celebrities that were involved in the event. So it had sort of that cross-promotional thing. And then you also had the pop culture aspect of it. You had Cyndi Lauper involved. You had the rock and wrestling connection, if you remember. And again, you weren't even alive then, but this may be something that you heard about. a week before WrestleMania. I believe it was a week before WrestleMania happened. There was a huge wrestling event on MTV where WWE and MTV co-promoted an event, and Cyndi Lauper was involved, and it was this whole rock and wrestling connection. And so they really kind of built this thing up to really be something. And again, at that time, wrestling didn't have I don't think they had the sheer amount of superstars and big talent as they do now. But you had some interesting matches on the card. You had Andre the Giant and Big John Studd in the Body Slam Challenge, the $15,000 Body Slam Challenge.
Yep.
So I mean, there was you had the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov defeat. They won the tag team titles from the U.S. Express. So like you had some stuff, you had some stuff on there that was really good, but the main event was really what people wanted to see. Hogan and Mr. T versus Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff. And the one thing I think that nobody ever gives WrestleMania enough credit for is the fact that Roddy Piper, if there was no Roddy Piper, there wouldn't have been the WrestleMania, because you needed the ultimate heel to be involved in the match to make Hogan and Mr. T the stars that they were. If anybody else had been in that main event, I don't think it would have meant as much, because you look at just the chemistry between Hogan and Piper, the fact that Mr. T and Piper legitimately hated each other. You cannot stress enough how much they hated each other. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that here was Mr. T coming into the wrestling world, and Roddy Piper didn't feel like he was taking it seriously. He didn't feel like he was, training as much as he should, being involved in pre-match stuff and planning and things. He didn't feel that Mr. T was taking it seriously. But again, I don't think if you put anybody else in that spot, you put any other heel at the time in that spot, I don't think it's as big a success as it is. Because as much as people wanted to see Hulk Hogan and Mr. T, they wanted to see Hulk Hogan and Mr. T because they wanted to see them beat Roddy Piper.
So your pick is Roddy.
My pick is Roddy Piper at WrestleMania 1. I feel like he is the unsung hero of WrestleMania 1. I feel like Roddy Piper is another one of those guys that we talk about that is a world champion with or without the belt. The fact that he never got the belt, I think, is a huge travesty. Even though I didn't pick him for greatest wrestlers never to win a world title, but I do think
arguably, yeah, he was one of those guys that definitely should have won the title, but I don't think he necessarily needed it. But if you want to talk about moments for Roddy, for me, it had to have been the episode of Piper's Pit where he hit Stuka over the head with the coconut. That to me was a defining heel moment of not only Roddy Piper but his show up to that point.
Yeah,
because you had so many memories on that show of heel moves, but when he smashed that coconut over Stuka's head, oh man, it's just a thing that you can't unsee, and it was just so good.
Oh yeah, watching old Piper's Pits are amazing because I mean, you want to talk about a guy that was a heel. I mean, he basically taught everybody how to do it, and that was the culmination of it when he smashed the coconut over Jimmy Snuka's head. There was just, he was never gonna do anything better on the show than that. And it shows how really good he is. Just watching him on Piper's Pit just gives you an idea of, I mean, it didn't take any effort at all for him to get people to hate him. He had heat everywhere he went. All he had to do was walk out, and there was instant heat. It just, he's one of those guys that, as a heel, I feel like it just came naturally to him, and he never had to try hard at it.
No.
He and that's not to say he didn't work hard at his job, but he never had to try hard to be a heel. People just instantly hated him. And you can't say that about a lot of people. That's not something that you can teach. That's, again, it's I feel like a very sort of old school mentality. Um, that a lot of guys, back in those days have, very few have today, some do. But again, I feel like it's a very old school mentality. Just being a real, true heel.
Yeah, he was just so many good moments of him as a heel. I mean, there was only one that nowadays would be super frowned upon, and I think you know the one that I'm talking about, and that's when he faced Bad News Brown and
Oh
painted half
yeah,
of his face black for a promo.
yeah.
Um,
That
that
was
was probably
that
one of
was
his
interesting.
ill-fated moments. That was probably
Yeah.
worse than it was better. But
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah,
he was
that's
that much of a
yeah.
hero that he just went for it. Like you hated him more because he did that. Because he went that far in. It went, took the risk, and whether it came out good or not, he took the risk and just went full blown heel. I was like, "Yep, screw it. This is how I'm going to do it."
Yeah, I think this is, for me, this is one of those situations where, you can equate it to something like Batman and the Joker. You had Hogan and Piper, and without Piper, to be that heel, you wouldn't have any reason for Hulk Hogan to be as good of a good guy as he was. Just like, without the Joker, there really is no need, for Batman to be who he is. And I don't think he gets enough credit for his part in WrestleMania 1. I don't think he gets enough credit for his role in the business at that time. And, you know, it's again one of these things that we really think about and we really talk about, after somebody's gone. And then we look back at these things and we say, well, if we look at this situation, you know, 50% of it was him. For
Yeah.
as good as Hulk Hogan was, Piper was bad, and that's what people wanted to see was him get beat.
Oh, that was the thing that people wanted to see. It was that, or what's he going to say? Because what was
Yeah,
his favorite line? Just when you think you have all the answers, I change the questions.
brilliant. I mean, just genius stuff from him. Seriously, everything he said was gold, but that was magic right there.
Like that quote will forever be in my head because it's just a great, not just
Yeah,
in wrestling, but just in general. It's just a great quote, just for everyday life.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get to our number one picks here, and I'm interested to see what you've got.
Yeah, this one was kind of a no-brainer, and I'm not sure if he's on your list. He might
Oh,
not be, but I mean, MJF. Here's a guy who just gets it. Dude's only 27 years old, and he's already one of the best talkers in the entire industry, in my opinion.
mm-hmm.
He has found the ability to mix this old school approach with this new school flair to create a character that is both a throwback and modern at the same time. And that's not an easy thing to do nowadays. When he gets on the mic, the power truly is in his hands. He could eviscerate just about anyone, whether it's his opponent or the crowd. He just knows how to get under your skin. And it's just, he's the best heel, in my opinion, in modern history. He just knows how to be a heel, and he's a heel 24/7 too. Like he is like this all of the time. There is no turning off button. This is just MJF is MJF, and he is not apologetic about it one bit.
Oh no, he lives it, and you know, I I saw MJF on the Indies earlier in his career before he made it to the big time, and this was the MJF you're seeing on TV now is the MJF I saw then. I'd seen him a number of times in Philly when he was doing stuff with Beyond Wrestling, and seriously, I mean, the MJF that you have now is the MJF that we had then. So this was a guy that very early on in his career understood what being a heel meant. And again, people can teach you how to be a heel, but they can't teach you that instinct to understand what it really means to be a heel. You can learn to do heelish things, but at the end of the day, that instinct that tells you exactly what a heel would do instead of what a baby face would do. I don't feel like that instinct is something you can teach. I think that people that are born to play heels, to take on that heel role, the ones that really excel at it, the ones that are really exceptional at it, I feel like it's because they have that instinct. They were just born with it.
Like, he has the ability to make you think one thing and then swerve it on you like that. Like when he was building up to be world champion, when he did that whole fake face turn, it was just perfect. It was just, he had us all in the palm of his hands. We were all eating it up. We thought he was going to turn face, and as soon as he won the belt, what did he do? He went on the media scrum and just crapped on everything. And it was just the perfect swerve of that feud leading up to that match. Like, it was just he's just so good at making you eat off of every word he says, like, no matter what it is.
Oh yeah. There's people in this business that know how to connect to the audience, and there are people in this business who know how to connect the audience to get heat. So connecting to the audience just to pull that heat out of them. And he's definitely one of those guys. There's just he understands not only what it means to be a heel, but he understands what it means to be a heel, in modern times. The use of social media, things like that. He really understands how to use that to his advantage. Like you said, when he was, the fake face turn, again, he used social media to his advantage to make that happen. And it's incredible to watch, the stuff that he does. And I'm interested to see where things go from here. Because, I feel like when he says that there's nobody left for him to challenge, I feel like he's really kind of hitting the nail on the head, because I don't feel like AEW has anybody that can really match his level right now.
He's on his own island of relevancy, if you will. He's the Roman Reigns in a sense of AEW. He doesn't have a faction or a bloodline, but he doesn't need one. He's just MJF. He only needs himself. It's him who got himself to where he is today. Since
and
the
where
beginning.
Roman Reigns elevates everybody that's in an angle with him, MJF elevates everybody who's in the ring with him.
Yeah, pretty much.
Look at the Four Pillars match.
He's had, dude.
Yeah, I mean, he's just that good that he makes other people better, and just to be able to do that as a heel, just incredible. My favorite heel moment from MJF, and I think we may have mentioned this on a previous episode. I'm not sure. I think we talked about it once before, but where MJF and Chris Jericho sing "Me and My Shadow."
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's just
so
I
good.
mean, that's personally one of my favorite moments in the history of professional wrestling, and not only because it was such great heel work, the whole thing from beginning to end, the interaction with the waitress, the food not being right, like everything was just perfect. But for me, the fact that MJF could actually sing blew my mind.
Oh yeah,
I did not see that coming.
He's so talented, and like he can literally do anything. I couldn't think of a moment because he's had so many. He's been a heel his whole time. So there's moments. I mean, obviously, you can think about when he turned heel on Cody. That was obviously a big one. I mean, we all knew it was coming, but when it happened, it was still like amazing.
Yeah.
For me, I guess you can say his CM Punk Mike moment when he lashed out when he came back about his contract and stuff. When he lost to Wardlow at that pay-per-view, and then because there was a whole bunch of controversy that he missed a meet and greet, then missed his flight, and he just made it for the show only to get squashed and then left again. Like there was so much controversy around that night that when he came back on Dynamite, he just pretty much had a hey, here's a mic, go air your grievances moment, like Punk did, but his was like visceral, man.
Mhm.
Like his was like he took what CM Punk did and just elevated it to like an 11.
Oh yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just crazy.
Yeah. You know, again, a generational talent. Just everything he does is phenomenal, and I don't think we've seen a heel like him in quite some time, and I don't think we will again.
No, I think if he ever does go to WWE in his 2024 bid, he can't be the same MJF that he is now than if he goes there because he would have to change his character.
Yeah.
It would have to be such a watered down version of him that it wouldn't be the same. I don't think if he made the jump.
I feel like if things don't go well between him and AEW as far as contract negotiations go, I feel like he's gonna go back to the Indies. I mean, there's a proven model on the Indies now where people are able to, you know, make a lot of money on the Indies just because they're able to control their own, really control their own narrative, control their own schedule. So there is a proven model there. It's obviously not going to be AEW money, but I think you're right though, and I think he knows that as well. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he tries a WWE run either, just because it's WWE. It's something he's never done. So
I'm not saying that
um,
he can't try out. I mean, if you want to go for it, go for it. But my concern is that they're going to water him down too much because they are a PG show and AEW is not, so they can kind of push the boundaries with him a little more and he can say
yeah,
more. But
yeah,
when you bring him to WWE, how do you keep such a brash, harsh character and dumb him down? It
yeah.
numbs
No, I
half
don't.
of what he is. Like that would be my only concern if he goes there is that his character is just dumbed down to him saying clean bad words
Yeah,
rather than him saying whatever he wants to say and just going off on fans and whoever.
I definitely don't think it would be successful if he goes, but who knows? It may be something he wants to try. And more, God bless him, more luck to him if that's what he wants to give a shot to. Who knows? He may just end up staying with AEW. Who knows what's going to happen? But either way, you know, I think it's going to be a long time before we see a heel like him again.
No, my only request, if they ever decided to do it, if MJF does do it, is have him go to Impact Wrestling and have him face Joe Hendry.
That would be an interesting feud. That'd be something I'd be all in for.
That would be just so out there to me. And I think it would be so funny the dynamic of Joe Hendry with the theme songs and the teasing, and then
Oh
MJF
yeah,
just being the visceral heel that he is. Ugh.
yeah, definitely.
What is Ralph's number one top heel in his opinion? Shoot.
All right, so for me, and this is not so much it's not so much the act itself. It's not so much the person who uh, perpetrated the act. For me, it's what happened afterwards, and this is why I had to put this at number one. Because when I first came up with this list, when I first thought about doing this conversation, part of it was because I had heard the conversation about the Iron Sheik being the biggest heel of all time, against Hogan. And I instantly thought, well, wait a minute. What about Roddy Piper at WrestleMania 1? So that was my very first thought. So that
Yeah.
was the very first thing I put on my list. And I really thought that was going to be number one. But I had to rank this above it just because of the implications that it has on the wrestling business. and that is Seth Rollins turning on the rest of the Shield. Because let's think about what happens after this. So you have Dean Ambrose gets his singles run, which frustrates him to no end, which then causes him to leave WWE, causes him to go to AEW. I mean, here's a guy who, at one point, as John Moxley was being recognized as the face of AEW, he's out there week in, week out. I think they're doing really great things with him now. I like this whole idea of him, being involved with these guys in the Blackpool Combat Club. I think it's a really interesting turn for his career for a guy who, had what I felt was a really ill-fated WWE title run. I don't think it ever got where it should have gotten with someone of his talent. But just think of all the implications it has on AEW if he never gets that singles run, he never gets frustrated, and he never leaves. Not to mention, no bloodline story.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Could WWE somehow have gotten there on their own? Well, I'm sure it's possible. But without the turn on Roman Reigns, without putting him in the spotlight as a singles wrestler and watching him fail so miserably at the absolute nonsense that they gave him, the Jack and the Beanstalk promo, just all of the horrible stuff.
Promo.
Yeah. Oh, and just getting shoved down the fans' throats and it just backfiring every step of the way. You never would have had him, need to precipitate this change, need to really reinvent the character. And I honestly, without Seth turning on them, I don't see the bloodline ever happening. I don't see that storyline happening. I don't see him becoming the tribal chief. I certainly don't see him as someone that they put with Paul Heyman.
That's just one of those guys that, whether heel or face, he just knows how to play the game. And when he cashed in his Money in the Bank briefcase against Reigns and Lesnar, the heist of the century was just done to perfection. And that whole first run with the belt, again, as a heel, in my eyes, was done to perfection. And it was just... Rollins as a heel, to me, was always be so much fun because he just, again, he knew how to get under your skin, whether he was a heel or a face, whatever. But as a heel, I feel like he just understood it more than being beloved because he knew how to just, again, get under your skin and make you mad at him.
Think about when he was wrestling Roman Reigns and he came out dressed in the Shield gear.
That was still one of my favorite entrances of last year. It was the best. Yeah. The best swerve. Reigns' reaction was priceless to that.
Oh yeah, yeah. So there are so many things that happen. I mean, I don't think we'd have Seth Rollins as world heavyweight champion right now if we didn't have, the breakup of the Shield and the way everything went down. Seth being the one to really betray the rest of the Shield and kind of joining the Triple H and Steph, and it just everything that happened after that. There's just so many things that I don't think that we would have right now, and things that, I mean, we're talking about the Bloodline storyline as being the greatest storyline in probably the last 30 or 40 years, and we may never see a storyline like that again anytime soon. I mean, we'll probably be dead before there's another storyline that gets the long-term slow build that one has.
Yeah.
It just has so many moving parts, so many layers. So many. I mean, if you put everybody on a piece of paper and you had to connect them, you'd have 150 lines drawing all over the place.
Yeah, you'd have a huge freaking weird graph.
Yeah, there's literally so much to unpack every single week from the Bloodline storyline, and it is honestly the best thing that's been going on in wrestling for the last 2 to 3 years. And
agreed.
We may never have gotten to see any of that if the Shield breakup didn't happen the way it did.
I do feel though that the breakup, I think, was a bit too soon. I feel like the Shield should have been given a little bit more time in their run before Rollins' turn. You could still have Rollins' turn and still do the same thing, but just push it back a little bit. I feel like they had just ridden this high of and I was at the one show with my brother, my younger brother. We went to see Evolution versus the Shield, I think 2 at Extreme Rules. Great matchup, and they had just won again. They had beat Evolution twice. So they were already riding this high of, hey, we're going strong, we're back together. And to have it end so suddenly, not only was it genius, but it also, I think, crushed me because I feel like they could have had a little bit of a longer reign as a trio than what they got. I think they were only really together for maybe 2 years tops before they broke up. They debuted in 2012. They broke up 2014. So that's my only gripe with it. It was a great way to have Rollins turn heel, but I feel like it was still feel it was a bit too soon in my eyes.
I don't know. I kind of feel like the Shield peaked in their feud with the Wyatt family. And I feel like the series of matches that they had with the Wyatt family, I feel like that was really the peak of their sort of career. And I'm not sure where else they would have gone with them. I mean, I feel like they were getting to a point where each of them was kind of developing their own character, as it were, rather than, just being kind of the, sort of carbon copies of each other to a point, when the Shield first debuted. And I feel like they really kind of were starting to grow into their characters. So, I mean, I'm sure there's definitely things that they could have done with them yet. There were probably plenty of feuds and things they could have done, but in retrospect, seeing what we got from it and seeing the things that happen afterwards, for me, I would not want to risk missing out on those things. I'll willingly sacrifice the Shield to get what we've gotten out of it, which honestly, I mean, the matches between the Shield and the Wyatt family are some of my favorite matches of all time. I love that rivalry. I love that feud. I thought it was just, I thought every match they had was just, a 5-star barn burner. I was a huge fan of that. So, to a point, I was kind of disappointed, but at the same time, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't want to take the chance.
No, and if you look at the Bloodline story, they took directly from the Rollins Shield thing. Because if you look at when Sami turned on Reigns, it was the exact way that Reigns fell when Rollins hit him in the back on Raw.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right.
He literally the exact same way as if Rollins hit him in the back, but it was Sami Zayn instead. It was like scene for scene, a rehash of what another trio or another group did to Reigns way back when. It was a great callback, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. So some great conversations about heels. We'd love to hear your opinions as well. Please reach out to us on socials at Mancast Network. Hit us up, mancastnetwork@gmail.com. We would love to hear your opinions on our thoughts, your opinions on heels in general. We're really just sort of scratching the surface as far as heel conversations go. There's a lot more we could talk about, and I'm sure. Yeah, and I'm sure down the line we will have another great conversation about heels. But I think we had a really good conversation today. Brought up some great heels, some great stuff over the years. Just amazing examples of what a heel could really be.
Yeah, heels are, I think, one of the most vital things in wrestling next to baby faces, of course. But you can't, if you don't have a good heel, you can't make a good baby face.
Yeah, absolutely. So just for everyone's information out there, so we normally record on a Friday night. However, we had some issues this week, so we're recording on Saturday night. So let me ask you, without giving any spoilers whatsoever, did you watch Collision?
Yes. I did.
Okay.
Indeed.
And we're gonna get into all the conversation about Collision next week because I haven't seen it yet. So we will talk about Collision a little bit next week. But if you were going to give it a letter grade, A, B, C, D, or F, what would you give the very first episode of Collision?
I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed that it felt different from Dynamite. It definitely felt like a different format. Like it didn't feel like they just put Dynamite on a Saturday. I appreciated that it definitely felt different. They had new commentators. You know, it feels like a different brand in a sense. Obviously there's some stars that are going to cross over both shows, but you really feel a sense of like, hey, could be a different sort of roster brewing on its own
Yeah.
show. Obviously, there's only one episode, so I can't
Yeah.
base it off anything. But
Sure.
first episode, I think it was pretty damn good. I don't want to give it an A because obviously I think there's going to be more episodes that could be better. So I'm going to give it a solid B for now, just to give it.
Very good.
I don't want to give it an A off the bat because that wouldn't be fair.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. There could be episodes that are better than this one, but a B for now. I want to give it a B.
Very cool. I will say I was excited to hear that Kevin Kelly got signed.
Yes, he is one
I
of the
think Kevin
commentators.
Kelly's
It's
I think
him
Kevin Kelly's
and
amazing.
Nigel McGuinness with
Yeah.
expert analysis from good old JR.
Yeah, Kevin Kelly is amazing. So Kevin Kelly actually is part owner in a wrestling promotion not super far from me here in Pennsylvania. And he was doing commentary and a number of other great jobs for them. They wrestle at the historic Hamburg Field House in Hamburg, Pennsylvania. Used to be a big house for WWF back in the day. But he's still part owner in the company. But obviously he has commentary duties with AEW now, and I think that's amazing. I think he's very deserving of it. I'm very excited for that. So yeah, good to hear that you enjoyed it. So I look forward to watching that, and stay tuned on our social media. We'll have some information about some upcoming shows, some topics we have, some guests we have. So definitely check out our social media. We'll have that stuff posted this week. And Sean, another great episode.
Indeed.
The time just flew by as we were talking about heels, to be honest.
Dude, I could talk heels, again, as much as I'm a babyface guy, I love a good heel that can just make me want to punch the screen.
The heels are fun. The heels have fun. Like that's, I believe that was why Chris Jericho said he enjoyed being a heel, because it was fun. So yeah, I could talk about heels all day as well too. So yeah, just another great episode. Sean, where can everybody find you online?
At Parma Chisel on all medias. I will spell it this time, CheeZle. I've been teasing you guys for far too long. If you can't spell
first.
it is CheeZle.
That is some late breaking news right there.
Chisel. That way, if you can find me, that's how you find me. Parma Chisel.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'm on all the socials at RealRalph316. Of course, as I mentioned before, you can find us at Mancast Network on the socials, or you can email us mancastnetwork@gmail.com. So we'll talk to you guys next week.
Ultimo Ant, take us out.
This is Ultimo Ant here. You're listening to Opinion City Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.